Shalom, everyone. This morning, I would like to look at the question, are we told to keep the Sabbath in the New Testament? The common consensus is no. Indeed, the Bible, at least the King James Version, does not show this to us. But the secret is hidden in translation. You see, English is an inferior language to both the Hebrew and Greek, from which we get our English translations. I'm going to go to a verse and just keep a keen eye on the word rest. There are 22 Greek words in the Bible for the word rest. In English, for us, rest is rest. One of the Greek words occur only once. And it is hidden though below the English word rest. So let me show you where in the New Testament tells us without a doubt that we are still to keep the Sabbath in the New Covenant. Because if you ask most people, almost everyone says it is not there. It is not written there. But it is. So let's go to Hebrew 4 verse 9. For if Joshua had given them rest, no, that's verse 8. If Joshua had given them rest, the King James Version says Jesus, which is an error because the original word there is Yahushua or Yahshua, Yahushua, which is the same name as the Hebrew Joshua who brought the children of Israel into the promised land. So they confused the names and thought it was Jesus, obviously. And so in the King James Version it says, if Jesus had given them rest. In subsequent translations, most other translations, it has been corrected. And you will see there, if Joshua or Yahshua had given them rest. Hebrews 4 verse 8, if Joshua had given them rest, then would he not afterward have spoken of another day? Verse 9, there remaineth therefore a rest to the people of Elohim. For he that is entered into his rest, he also hath ceased from his own works as Elohim did from his. Let us labor therefore to enter into that rest, lest any man fall after the same example of unbelief. So we will go back to dissect the verses. Verse 9, there remaineth therefore a rest to the people of Elohim. If you look at the Greek meaning of rest used in verse 9, it is the word sabbatismos, right? Strong's number G4520, sabbatismos, used only once, and let us look at its short meaning. Short meaning is a Sabbath rest. The longer definition, a keeping of the Sabbath, or a Sabbath rest. So if we go back into the verse and interject that proper translation, it would have said, there remaineth therefore a Sabbath keeping to the people of Elohim, or there remaineth therefore a Sabbath rest to the people of Elohim, as several translations have rendered it. And so there you have, in the New Testament, the Sabbath must be kept by the people of the Most High. And if we continue to dissect the subsequent verses, verse 10, for he that is entered into his rest, the rest there used is katapusis, which long definition goes back to the rest of the children of Israel who were brought into Canaan. For he that is entered into his rest, he also hath ceased from his own works, as Elohim did from his. Now, to what works is the Bible referring to here? It is referring to Genesis 2, verses 2 to 3. And let's go to that and match that. And on the seventh day, Elohim ended his work which he hath made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And Elohim blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which Elohim created and made. So verse 10 is telling us that for he that is entered into his rest, he also had ceased from his own works as Elohim did from his. So just as Elohim rested and kept the Sabbath on the seventh day after creation, those who are his will also do the same. Notice it says in verse 10, he also had ceased from his own works. Works are physical. It is speaking of a physical Sabbath rest, just as the Creator did on the seventh day after creation. Verse 11 gives us a warning. Let us labor, and the word for labor there is spoudazo, the Greek word spoudazo, and we look at that. Let us labor therefore to enter into that rest, that's katapusis, lest any man fall after the same example of unbelief. And that word unbelief, apatheia, we'll also look at. I'll repeat it. Let us labor therefore to enter into that rest, lest any man fall after the same example of unbelief. So let us labor. Let us spoudazo. What's the meaning of spoudazo? Spoudazo means to use speed, that is to make effort, be prompt or earnest, to give diligence, to be diligent, endeavor. So we must endeavor, be diligent to rest from our works, just as the Most High rested from his works on the Shabbat. Right? And it says, lest any man fall after the same example of unbelief. And I won't look at the meaning of the word unbelief. I'll leave it for after this. But verse 11 is referring to the journey of the children of Israel in the wilderness. And for that, to match this, we go to Yechezkel or Ezekiel 20, verse 15 to 16. Yet also I lifted up my hand unto them in the wilderness, that I would not bring them into the land which I had given them, flowing with milk and honey, which is the beauty of all lands. Because, listen carefully, because they despised my judgments, and walked not in my statutes, but polluted my Sabbaths, for their heart went after their idols. So we see polluting the Sabbath is being equated with idolatry. And it is because one of the reasons that the children of Israel were not allowed into the promised land, we were told that they were rebellious. One of the reasons for their rebellion was that they did not keep the Sabbath. So verse 11, for he that is entered into his rest, he also, verse 11, let us labor therefore to enter into that rest, lest any man fall after the same example of unbelief, lest any man be like the children of Israel in the wilderness and rebel against Yahweh by not keeping his Sabbath and going after their idols. Idolatry is not keeping the Sabbath. And why not keeping the Sabbath is idolatry? Because the Sabbath identifies, he says the Sabbath is a sign between him and his people. The Sabbath identifies us as his people. The Friday identifies the Muslims. That's their day. The Sunday identifies pagans. That's their day of worship. The Sabbath identifies Yahweh's people. Anyone outside of the Sabbath who doesn't uphold the Sabbath is looked on by him as being idolatrous. Okay? Now, let's look a little more at the warning. Lest any man fall after the same example of unbelief. And we said unbelief, the Greek word is apatheia. So let's look at the meaning of the word apatheia and we'll see the significance of not keeping the Sabbath. Apatheia, unbelief, it means obstinate and rebellious, disobedience. Alright? And when we speak about rebellion, we know Yahweh hates rebellion. Because in 1 Samuel 15:23 it says, for rebellion is as witchcraft. Rebellion is equated with the abomination of witchcraft. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. Because thou hast rejected the word of Yahweh, he hath also rejected thee from being king. So we see the principle here. Rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. If we fall in the same example of unbelief, as said in Hebrews 4:11, we are rebelling. Because the word apatheia means rebellion. And that means it's equated to the abomination of witchcraft. And it is stubbornness. And the stubbornness of not heeding to the word is as iniquity and idolatry. No. If we go to Matthew 7:21-23, when it says, Master, Master, didn't I prophesy in your name? I don't have it at hand. In verse 23, it says, I never knew you, ye that work iniquity. So iniquity workers, those who work iniquity, will not enter the kingdom. And we see apatheia, the same example of unbelief, not keeping the Sabbath, is being equated with rebellion and being equated with iniquity. So we see how critical this is that we obey the word. So let me just go back and just read it to conclude, because this is very deep, because it goes into several scriptures that are what I call roadblock scriptures that tell you straight and plain you cannot enter the kingdom. And you can look to Matthew 15 verse 9. You can look it up yourself. And Revelation 21:27. All these are implied by this Hebrews 4:11. When you look at the Greek meaning that are under the word. So let me just finish by repeating. There remaineth therefore a rest, a sabbatismo, a Sabbath rest, a keeping of the Sabbath to the people of Elohim. For he that is entered into his rest, he also has ceased from his own works, as Elohim did from his at the Genesis creation. Let us labor, let us endeavor, therefore, to enter into that rest, lest any man fall after the same example of unbelief or rebellion or iniquity. There remains a Sabbath rest for the people of Yahweh. Shalom.